I have a form of autism which is called Asperger's syndrome. And I was diagnosed with it when I was 12 years old, although I showed the signs when I was about 4 to 5 years old. But it does explain a lot about why I can be quirky and sometimes very humorous to many people, so to speak.
And Nick, for those of us who don't know, just explain in detail what Asperger's syndrome actually is.
Okay, well, Asperger's syndrome, like I just said, is one of the many forms of autism. In fact, it's one of the three most common. The other two being classic autism and pervasive developmental disorder not otherwise specified, or PDD-NOS for short. Asperger's syndrome, from what I can see, as I have it, is a memory pattern, learning, and social interaction disorder, and a concentration one as well. Because I used to struggle in primary school and secondary school with certain subjects, but as I progressed into college and uni, my concentration got better, and I used the OCD aspects of my Asperger's to try and better my work even then, and to better myself in life. So it all wasn't lost, so to speak.
So it's clearly never ever held you back.
No, I'm someone who tries to look at the positives of having the condition as opposed to the negatives. And it's a shame because a lot of people tend to dwell on the negatives of the condition more than the positives. There are perks to having Asperger's syndrome, such as having average or above average intelligence, a photographic memory, memorising your favourite or obsessed subject. So there are many perks, and you can come across to people as very intelligent. So, it's all good.
Do you have any of these perks?
Oh, yes, of course. Some people tell me that I come across as a very, very, very intelligent person and all that, which is very nice. And they say, you seem like you're nearly 25 years old, but you seem so mature for your age. I'm like, well, thank you very much. That's a very nice compliment. And like I said, I try and show people that even with Asperger's, it's not impossible to do great things in life. It might be harder, but it's not impossible.
So it's obvious that you have a very positive outlook on Asperger's syndrome, is that right?
Absolutely. Like I said, I try to use the positives more than the negatives. And I want to try and show people that, as an autism advocate that is, that having Asperger's is not a bad thing. In fact, it can be a very good thing, because I don't think normal really exists in today's society anymore. And even if it did, I think most people would consider that to be boring. I think it's cool to be different. Do you know what I mean? I would much rather, soar with the eagles and be who I want to be than rather walk amongst the crowds and fit the mould of, oh, you have to be this type of person or so forth,
Have you always had this positive outlook?
Not always, no. As a child, I was fairly happy, but up until I got diagnosed with Asperger's, because obviously I showed the signs from when I was first 4 to 5 years old in primary school, and I was struggling with work, and I just couldn't understand because I felt like I had the same level of intelligence or above that of most kids in the school, but I just couldn't understand why I couldn't hack it, so to speak, with those subjects. And then when I was 12 years old and got diagnosed by a clinic with Asperger's syndrome, it was like carrying around a big bag of rocks. I was finally able to let that go because I was like, now I understand why I'm different. Now I understand why I struggle on certain things but excel in others. Why I'm different, so to speak.
You mentioned that you were diagnosed when you were 4 to 5 years old. What were some of the signs that you showed?
Well, prior to coming to primary school, I had to take speech therapy because as a baby, I didn't progress as quick as most babies do with speech. And I had to take speech therapy, and that was the first sign. The second sign is that I was falling behind in subjects. Not that I wasn't trying hard, because the teachers observed me and they saw that I was trying, but at the same time still falling behind. And they were like, yeah, he has a learning disability. And even though I didn't get diagnosed with it, they were kind enough to give me and my mum the assistance necessary in the school. We're going to help you out and make sure that his experience here is as comfortable as possible, because clearly he's got something holding him back. Okay, well, like I said earlier, I'm an autism advocate, and I do that in 3 different ways. I'm a writer for online blogs, a writer for magazine articles, and the one that I'm most known for, public speaking. I did my last talk, as a matter of fact, yesterday at the Aston Villa football ground during the big autistic convention going on there. I was in the interview room of the Aston Villa football ground talking before about 20-odd people from what I remember, and it was a really lovely experience. I had people coming up to me and saying, oh, you're such an inspirational person, and asking me for advice, how do I help, my autistic relative in this regard? How do I be there for them? And I try and reassure it, because that's the point of me being an autism advocate. I want to be the mouthpiece for the other people with autism that may not have as much confidence as I do. And I did a talk before that as well at the NEC in Birmingham, a big autistic convention that was passing through there, Manchester and London. talked for a good 30 minutes there, which is, you think it's a long time to talk, but it goes by so quickly, And I touched many people there as well. I touched their hearts right here, so they said to me, one of them said. And it was a really, really nice experience. The most rewarding part is just helping people out. And that's what I want to do as an autism advocate.
And how important is it to raise awareness about autism in the UK?
Well, I think they're doing a good job now, obviously. There's a lot more awareness, because back in the 90s when I started showing signs, and we're talking about the early 90s here, Asperger's was sort of like a new thing back then. There wasn't as much awareness of it or so forth. Nowadays, it's more commonly known, but there's still a lot of work that needs to be done, because there are still people out there that may not fully understand what autism is, or let alone any of its conditions, like my Asperger syndrome or classic autism or PDD-NOS. There does need to be more work done in raising awareness. So, we need more social media. I mean, social media has been great, but we do need to do a lot more work on there. It never hurts to do more, even when you're doing great.
How can more be done, Nick?
Basically, more charity events, I would say, to raise awareness at places like the Aston Villa football ground, or say, for example, besides that, the Blues City ground as well, or other arenas besides the NEC, big places across the country that can have these conventions, because the more bigger these events are and the more publicity that they get on social media as well, if it's marketed the right way, the more people will listen and want to come and learn about what autism is all about.
And Nick, tell me about your aspirations to become a voice actor.
Well, I did voice acting for an indie video game company up till about earlier this year, when my time with that company was up, but it was an enjoyable experience. I did voice acting for that game company. Since then, I've been an aspiring voice actor. I've tried to provide... I've put together a voice reel and sent it out to voicing and casting agents and so forth, to try and get noticed. But no, voice acting's always been something that I've always been keen to get into.
And really quickly, before we go, Nick, what's next in store for you?
Well, I've currently got projects coming up via the Birmingham Hippodrome to possibly do some projects, so that should be interesting. I'm due to star in a short horror film, which will be fantastic as well. And I've got a big convention coming up on the 3rd of December for the International Day of Disabled People's Convention to speak for them. And on April 22nd of next year, I'm in Redditch. I started to get into it when I did the extended project in college, my last year of college before I went to university. Because the extended project, you could pretty much do whatever you want. And I did stand-up comedy, with the performance being my final piece. And then I went on to university for 3 years and graduated, and I was a bit of a slump, so to speak. I didn't have any work coming in, and I was on the dole, so to speak, and that type of thing can be quite soul-crushing, And then in April of 2014, last year, I saw a course on the Solihull Arts Complex website that do stand-up comedy with this travelling comedian called Theo Theobald. He's a travelling comedian and a poet. And I said, you know what, you only live once, so let's do it. And I signed up for 6 weeks to do a course, and I did a performance at the end of it. Since then, I got the ball rolling, because a month after that, I did a gig in Staffordshire for Teenage Cancer Trust and the late Stephen Sutton. I got to meet him and shake hands with him, and that really, touched me, and I really enjoyed that. And it was really heartwarming for him to talk to me and say, you did really well up there, so, And then after that, I've done various gigs, amateur gigs, around the East and West Midlands, places like Birmingham and Solihull and Derby, Worcester, Burton, and places like that.
Now, tell me about your stage name.
Oh, yes, of course. My stage name is Nicky Priest, and I know what the people at home are thinking, oh, what an unusual name. Well, there was this other comedian called Nick Hall from London who's done about 400 gigs, and obviously, since he's been at it longer than I have, I thought, okay, I have to come up with my own stage name to avoid copyright infringement, and since he's the Nick Hall that's been at comedy longer than I have, I thought, best not, compete over it. So I came up with my stage name by combining my first name with the name of one of my favourite classic rock and metal bands, Judas Priest. And people are telling me, Nicky Priest is actually a really cool name. It slides off the tongue so nicely. And I've been using that for stand-up comedy and all performance-related events I've been involved with ever since. And
just quickly, Nick, I mean, stand-up comedy is hard for any comedian, to get the crowd going. For someone with Asperger's syndrome, how difficult is it for you?
For me, well, obviously for someone else who's probably got Asperger's syndrome, they might struggle with it because of confidence issues or so forth. But I don't tend to struggle with it at all. As a matter of fact, I actually love getting up on stage and performing in front of the audience and making them laugh, or trying to make them laugh, making them laugh straight away. It's wishful thinking. But no, I just love getting up there and performing in front of people.